Welcome to the second annual Synth Society Summit, hosted by the Southern California Synth Society and the Colorado Modular Synth Society. We're proud to bring you this live all-weekend event featuring many of the talented members of our synth community. In this panel, we explore the modular system that don't fall into the Eurorack format. So I was saying, in this panel, we explore the modular system that don't fall into the Eurorack format. I'm Franck Martin, my co-host is Silent Mountain, and I'm with Todd Barton, Logan, also known as Lowgain, the Galaxy Electric, and René Boscio. First, some music with Jay Mollerskov, and I'll see you just after. Hi everyone, welcome to this special panel on Buchla 5U Serge. Oh my! So I'm with Saint Mountain, who's my co-host, Todd Barton, Logan, also known as Lowgain, Galaxy Electric, and René Boscio. So maybe a round of introduction. Let's start with Saint Mountain.
Hey everybody, I think you might know me, Outside Mountain, aka David Soto. Just hanging out here, being the guy who has all the questions about all these non-Eurorack modules. So thank you, Franck, for hosting. This is gonna be fun.
Yes, indeed. Next, Logan.
I'm Logan. I own Lowgain Electronics. Been an active synth user for many years in multiple formats, and not a hater of anything as long as it's a synth. Just like I love all formats.
Todd.
Todd Barton, Sonic adventurer. Yeah, I've been at this for like decades. Love Serge, Buchla, and Hordijk, and I definitely have Eurorack stuff. So just keep following the sound.
What about you, René?
So yeah, my name is René. I'm a Puerto Rican composer, mostly for film and television. I'm based in Los Angeles, and I have a bird symphony with me tonight. So today, it's today. But yeah, so I'm excited to be here and chat about all things non-Eurorack, Buchla, 5U, oh my stuff. So yeah, happy to be here.
All right, thanks. And the Galaxy Electric.
Hello, I'm Jacqueline.
I'm Augustus. And it's super nice to be with this group of people.
Yeah,
we're amongst
awesome.
friends here. It's really cool. And we're excited to talk about Buchla stuff.
Yes, and I see plenty of people in the chat. So if you've got some questions for any of the panelists, just put them in the chat, and Saint Mountain and myself will relay them. Let's start first with Todd. So my guess is that you got a Surge nearly in when Surge came out, but what got you to go from Surge, then Buchla, and then 5U? How did you saw the difference in composition, in philosophy between each one of them?
Actually, the first thing, back in the mid-'70s, a friend of mine, Doug Leedy, loaned me his Buchla music easel for 3 days, sent me upstairs to his attic apartment, and I didn't come out. And there was no manual. I'd never done anything electronic music. I'd heard stuff, but I'd never touched anything. So it took me like hours before I could even sort of get a sound out of these. Well, I didn't know what all these sliders were. At any rate, short story there. Got hooked. Said, hey, can I buy one? He goes, yeah, they're probably $10,000 like in 1970. So that's say 30,000. So it's like, okay, no, I'm 20 something, not happening. Then I heard about Serge, and so saved up a bunch of money. He was in the Bay Area at the time, Haight-Ashbury, and I was going to school in Stockton. My parents were in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I would go and visit, and finally saved enough to get a 3-panel Serge in 1979. And there still weren't any manuals. The 79 manual hadn't come out. The only thing I had was the first edition of Alan Strange, not the Bible that we all know. And this didn't even mention Serge in it because it was 1972 and probably written in 71. So I got the Serge, and again, I didn't know what any of this stuff did. It took me forever, but finally figured out to get some sounds, and then that was my go-to instrument for about 10 years. And then, eventually got older, saved a lot of money, and in 2004 ordered a Buchla system from Dawn. And So that's and then I started hearing about Rob Hordijk, I think in the like 90s or something for me, for sure in the 2000s, and looked into that. What I find is all three of them are, quote, West Coast synths, in that there's a lot going on under the hood. They're multifunctional. All modules are multifunctional. But what I also love is their instruments. They're conceived as a self-contained instrument, not unlike a guitar or a violin. I mean, and they then become, for instance, a violin. You have Itzhak Perlman playing, you have Stefan Grappelli playing, you have, Laurie Anderson, or you even have Alan Strange's wife writing a book about how to do extended techniques on the violin. So you can take any instrument and take it different places. And these three designers, Don, Serge, and Rob, have such a cohesive vision, and it's a springboard for me for curiosity and imagination. And I like that it's all of a piece. So differences, workflow is completely different in all three. There's that. But what I find is similar is they all have randomness. Then these are three completely different forms and flavors of randomness between Buchla, Serge, and Hordijk. But that seems to be part of all three systems. Another commonality is, of course, Don's low pass gate, but you can get really poppy things out of Serge, VCFQ, the Twin Peaks out of the Hordijk. So there's this, membrane pluck thing going on. The most interesting thing for me was back in the day in the 70s, most other synthesizers had dedicated waveforms, but Buchla and Serge had wave shaping, wave folding, and that played out later in Hordijk. So with those, you have infinite waves in many. Instead of having 5 dedicated waves, you can be morphing between them, changing the timbre, the wave folding. It's not unlike human speech, which is continuously variable and continuously changing timbre over time. That's one pitch, but it's time. There's lots of timbral changes in that. And I think Don, particularly, and Serge were interested in creating instruments that gave us all the parameters we need, that are part of the acoustical world. None of them ever wanted to emulate acoustical instruments. That was taken care of for decades, centuries, as far as the orchestral palette. But they wanted to give people the tools to create things that hadn't been heard and couldn't be heard until you had these wide ranges and interactions. So I'll try to wrap up here. The other really important thing, and that I learned just intuitively with the Serge, because that was actually the first one I got to do, was what Serge calls patch programmability, which I'm sure he observed from working with Morton Subotnick in New York and also coming out to Cal Arts, where he started to create his version and he was teaching right along with Subotnick. And patch programmability, I think the essence of it is the banana cable, right? And the beauty of the banana cable is you can stack them. So you can take one source here and send it to 8 different places. So I grew up thinking that's the way things were. It wasn't until I started getting into 5U in the 2000s that I knew what a mult was. Because I'd been multing forever between Buchla and Serge. That's just part and parcel of everyday patching. And the Hordike, you'll notice too, is all about, this is like a mult on 6 mults on steroids, okay?
Yeah.
This is the core connector nexus of the Hordike system. So I find they're all similar in that. And now that I've talked about mults, I think I'm going to pass over to Logan because, you know, his company works with converters between all formats. And so if you can chat about, you know, what's the difference between the formats and how that comes out in CV and voltage and audio and patch cables and pitch.
Yeah. Luckily, a lot of it is very similar, but there are some differences to keep in mind. Like Eurorack and Moog format kind of handle that the CV and audio signal is sort of in a 10 volt peak to peak, plus minus 5 volts. Surge is more like a 5 volts peak to peak. Gates in Surge are like a 5 volt pulse. And then in Buchla, you've got, you know, 2 different, you know, so your CV is separated from your audio path. So your audio is more or less line level. And then the CV is very similar. I mean, it mostly handles, I believe, in 0 to 10 volts. Buchla gets a little weird because in the 200E, I believe they're a little more sensitive to negative voltages. So there's a lot to remember there in terms of like the difference in voltages, but luckily a majority of these formats are their cross compatibility is fairly straightforward. Buchla, the only difference in terms of the pitch voltage, 1.2 volts per octave versus everything else that's basically 1 volt per octave. So it's, in terms of like the UTL boxes that I make, luckily most of that is just literally connecting one cable, like connector to another. You don't have to do any conversion or anything like that. But there are some formats that you have to consider, like Ciet Lombard and Lower Mill. And like I said, the 200E, I believe, is a little sensitive to negative voltages. So it's something to keep in mind when converting from, say, like a Eurorack system, patching into one of these other formats. But for the most part, it's kind of impossible to break the stuff.
Well, what about the ground? Because on the on the Buchla, then the system is a ground. You just send the signal. So
yeah, so
you have to be worried about that.
With the formats that are using banana cables, since that's a single conductor wire, it's just like one wire. There's no shield. You have to connect the grounds in between any device that you plug the banana format synthesizer or whatever with. So typically, like all the power supplies of Serge and Buchla have a ground banana jack near the power supply, or modules that have specific ground connections so that you can then interface with something with like a 1/4 inch jack or an 1/8 inch jack.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for explaining us a little bit the conversion method between the various systems. Let's go a little bit with the Galaxy Electric. So you told me the last time you like to travel in space and find some new interesting planet. How does the Buchla modules, what sonority, what inspiration it brings into your music? What do you find special about Buchla for your music?
That's a great question. I would say that Buchla was sort of like our introduction to West Coast synthesis. So, prior, like we had only really been messing with subtractive synthesizers. And when we discovered, the different elements that make up West Coast synthesis, like, FM, these things aren't necessarily limited to West Coast synthesis, but they're, things that characterize, especially the low pass gates, And we were just, blown away by how you could get these like really, we were looking to make space age sounds, and we sort of like auditioned a number of different types of synthesis. And for our ears, the West Coast palette, sort of appealed to us. And then, when you get into the format, it's like there's not that many modules because it was sort of designed as a closed system, initially. And we have like the vintage clones. And, so each module is like a rock star in the scene of Buchla, in the sense that like, there's only one ring modulator or frequency, shifter, unless you're talking about the stuff that's hidden, the Easter eggs on the 208. But we just, really liked that about it. It's like the world of Eurorack. I love Eurorack modules. I think that there are some brilliant ones. And I feel like, that format has sort of allowed modular synthesis to
that's the fertile playground.
Continue into the future. But there's just something about the the format of Buchla where it's like, each module, you get more into using the modules than, necessarily thinking about what your next one's going to be. And so I like that. It cuts down on the gas a little bit. Not to say that I didn't have
like
it.
One way to have a limitation.
Right? Before I built out my bigger system, I just wanted every module. I was like, I'll take one of each, please. But finally I've gotten to a place where that has slowed down a bit.
I also think the way that we play live, improvising, the Buchla format, especially with the easel, was, had that in mind. Initially, I would say, Don was creating these instruments for people to play live and compose live. And I would say that's what the vein of, creation that we like to be in. And it seems to flow well with that.
For sure. Yeah. It's just evident that, these things were created specifically to aid a composer in accomplishing their goal. And it's really awesome.
Yeah, from a performance
standpoint. Yeah.
Sounds cool. Capability of going live with an instrument of music. So, René, I understand you got many systems, and you're a composer by profession, and you've got the Eurorack, you've got normal synthesizer and VST plugin, and you use everything to make a composition. But you've got also a 5U system. So, how does it fit into your workflow and when somebody asks you for a specific piece of music?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, I buy gear visualizing it as a tool for the scores that I work on. And when it came to the 5U, I had recently owned a Moog one. And before that, I had like a Mother 32 and a DFAM, which I let go of when I bought the Moog one. And it was like, my main polyphonic synthesizer. But I found that I was missing the grit and punch of like the mono stuff in the Moog sound. And then, I decided to sell the Moog one, and I bought a Pro 3 from Sequential to give me that mono punch. But it's such a different sound than the Moog sound, And then I was looking for something to give me that Moog sound again. And I, for a while, considered buying like a Minotaur or a Subsequent or something. But I've heard 5Us, and coming from Eurorack stuff, I felt like the 5U also delivered more beef for some reason. Like they just felt like they had more weight. And I had also been toying around for an easel command for a while and felt that that also delivered a different kind of power compared to the Eurorack stuff. So I was like, you know what? Instead of just staying within that and maybe buying another Mother 32 again or buying a Minotaur or something, let me sort of build kind of what a Minotaur is, but in a 5U system. And so that's what I decided to do. I got a small box 11 from synthesizers.com, and then essentially just, built like a 2 oscillator ladder filter basic system within that. And then I ended up switching out one of the synthesizers.com oscillator for an STG Soundlabs oscillator because it has this kind of like drift feature, which I found very interesting. So essentially the way I use my 5U will be in a variety of ways, mostly treating it as a single monosynth system. But so I'll use it a lot for like when I need bass arpeggios or stuff that gives me a lot of punch. And then I'll use it a lot for creating like dark, gritty textures with those 2 oscillators, especially putting the drift on in playing in unison or octave aparts, because then you start getting this kind of like, tension, especially once you throw it through reverb. And I ended up getting a Free State Effects Ornament and Crime as well, just to kind of like have, many tools in there for different, I love using the Lorentz application a lot, which is just kind of like, again, drifting LFOs that, kind of pull on each other, gravitational. And I just love, how much versatility there is in a simple system like that, where all you have is 2 oscillators, a filter, and a VCA, then with some envelopes and LFOs. It's like, that's really all you need to do anything when it comes to single voice textures or whatever it is that I typically need in the film scoring type of work that I do. I don't know if that kind of answers it, but yeah.
That's really interesting. I was reading a little bit the comment, Jay Mollerskov said, I think you answered it, Logan, about the different voltage on the Seattle Lombard. And I see Electric Kitchen also say that he did an internship at the Serge factory, I guess in San Francisco. That is just opposite. They used to be opposite Robot Speak. So it's quite interesting. So what about you, Todd? And, please ask a question to each other. Know that you've seen a little bit each other. We need to make that a discussion. What about you, Todd? How do you see the composition? Are you also improvising mainly, or have you got some set piece or that you need to do?
Pretty much everything I've been doing the last many years has been free improvisation. And because 40 years prior to that, I composed for a theater, so I was, writing for producers and directors and everybody else, which I really loved. But then I wanted to spend time exploring music and doing free improvisation and starting out not knowing what's happening. In fact, I often don't even know what the first sound will be, and then let that unfold and pull me through. And improvisation, having composed for so long, the composer brain is always going. So I think it was Wayne Shorter that said, composition is improvisation slowed down, and improvisation is composition sped up. So I like the sped up composition right now. And, it's, that's where it's mainly easel because that's easy to travel with, but yeah.
So
I was going to say, oh, sorry.
I was going to ask, like, it seems like everybody here also has Eurorack. And and maybe this is just observation, but it seems that a lot of the Buchla, Serge, and other formats really lend themselves to improvisation. At least that's what we see a lot of shared. And do you think that format is maybe has more propensity to be used in the improvisations like staging versus Eurorack, or is that just just the way it's just kind of being presented?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Well, improvisation, I think anything can be improvised upon. It doesn't matter what it is. It just is a matter of, in a way, finding your own language. And what I love about modulars is I feel connected to the sound if I'm turning a knob or moving a slider. There's a one-to-one relationship there. And even if I have a really complex sort of self-generative patch, I do know how the ocean is going to shift to a certain extent. I can't control it completely, but and so I think it's just a matter of trusting and for me it's practicing gestures and transitions, because I can turn my sequencer on and it will go forever. The trick becomes sculpting it, and also the trick becomes trusting in silence now and then, because it's easy to just go. So, I think anything can be improvised on.
Yeah, I definitely think it comes down to how you interact with the synth that you're using and what inspires you. And I think that's more of a personal choice more than whether or not one format is better at improvising than the other. I get on a Serge system and I'm just inspired, like I just want to do things. And like it for me, interface, and I'm a broken record every time I talk about it, but interface is everything, and how the interface of that synthesizer or that instrument inspires you is the most important thing. And yeah, I mean, if you don't get inspired in front of something, it's going to be kind of difficult to get motivated, to get your mind going in improvising state, or like to be able to perform that way. So I think it comes down to interface in terms of like what motivates you to be able to improvise.
Yeah.
Knowing that instrument as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I would say that, knowing your instrument, but also, sort of like the easel, for example, like Jackman was saying earlier, lends itself to improvisation, and in a way that it just really seems like it's designed sort of like if a trick, bike or skateboard or something is designed for a certain type of trick, like I feel like the music easel is designed for, like sort of this improvisational, modular performance thing. Like it just really feels like it's setting, you don't have to try super hard to jump off in that direction. Whereas I feel like with Eurorack, you're sort of like, it's almost like the PC versus the Mac, it's like the
Oh no.
the Eurorack is like a little more manual, like you could set yourself up with a very easel like interface, but you have to be super intentional about it. And it might even be less costly, easier, more effective, and have modules that can run circles around what the easel can do, but you have to be super intentional about it.
Yeah.
But the sound too.
Yeah.
Because I feel like before I bought the easel command, I had a little palette 62 system where I had a DPO and a low pass gate from Make Noise, and I essentially put together an easel inspired system, and the functionality was there, but the sound it's just so unique. It's like a Buchla oscillator or the low pass gate. It's like I feel like it's the same thing what I was saying earlier, which I don't know if it's just in my head, but I just feel like they deliver such a different tone and punch, both the 5U and the Buchla, which is the only things I have experience with, compared to the Eurorack. But yeah, so is it, excuse my ignorance, but is it the power that it requires, right, that gives it a beefier, as I would describe it, sound?
I don't know. Could it be synth floor that the plus minus 15 is, you get more headroom. So it's like, well, maybe. But
I agree. The sound is amazing.
Yeah.
We had a question from the Electric Kitchen for the panel. Do you find that you tend to live match more with this system?
To
live match.
What's live match?
I was gonna say, what is live match?
Like live patch?
Well, you've got bit match or live match. You hear some music, or you, as Todd was explaining, you start with a sound, and then from there you say, okay, what's my next voice and what's my next voice. And if you perform with somebody else, also it's more interacting with the sound. I'm running Polin Oliveros, deep listening. So you listen the modules, and then from there it tells you where to go.
Well, yeah, he corrected himself in the
live
chat
patch.
and said it was live
Live patch.
patch, not live match.
Oh, live patch. Yeah.
But live match is now a thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's do it. Live match and live patch.
Okay, wait. Is this a dating show?
exactly. Me and you, Todd, we're going out for an all-paid expense dinner. So
Please,
fly out.
please swipe right.
Yeah.
I think live patching is important. It keeps things very interesting. I've done a few. A lot of my performances end up that way. Starting a performance with a live patch is also really interesting. Just like you have nothing patched before you begin, and then you just start.
Yeah.
It could be a complete train wreck, or it could be something that's like everybody's like, that was amazing. It's like, cool. I did not mean for that to happen. But
one thing I did a concert in Portland probably 6 or 7 years ago, maybe. Yeah. And I had asked for a volunteer to come up and just move all the sliders on the easel without, no sound was up. And this 10-year-old kid goes, I'll do it. So he moved all the sliders, and then that became and then all I did was fade in and hear what it was.
That's cool.
And then started live patching from there. And so this is how we get kids hooked, first of all.
absolutely.
And he's come to, now he's like 17 and he shows up at the concerts too. So it was great to see him, grow, and he's exploring things now too. But yeah, start from audience participation.
So, Saint Mountain, what's your next format? Did we convince you to get any one of them?
Oh yeah, I love Buchla. I had my good friend Mike Thomas, who used to live down the street from me before he moved to Kentucky. He had a Buchla system, and he was getting into it. And I used to go over there and play. And before he had that, he had the Eurorack Serge stuff, and so I used to go over there and plug that. It's kind of funny you're bringing up the live patching thing, because that was something that I thought that's how you played the Serge. I thought you had a live patch. I in my mind, I'm like, who would show up with like a patched up Serge, right? I don't know. I just was like, I was at the very beginning of modular stuff, but I don't know which one I'd ever get first.
The correct answer is Serge.
The correct answer is probably Serge. Only because I could probably if it's economical, yeah, then what are we talking? But I mean, I think that being now a couple 3 years into Eurorack and seeing my very first interaction with Eurorack was Make Noise, which made me think about a lot of West Coast stuff and all the examples that Walker's shared, that the strange patches, as you mentioned, really have taken me down that. And also what I also like is I'm a big story guy. I love stories. I love to know the history of things. I love to know, more outside the mechanics of it. I like to know the story. And the Galaxy Electrics, you've been doing all these, stories about the history of it. And Todd, when you talk about the history of it and hearing Serge was across the street from RoboSpeak, that adds flavor to it. And I know it's probably something that won't necessarily come out in a song for every listener, won't maybe pick up on that. But as an artist, as a musician, I like to carry that into it. And I do like that all these formats we're talking about are just so recent and not recent enough for me to be able to talk to those people who did it, but it was so close. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You
can talk to Tony Rolando.
Yeah, exactly.
You were talking about Make Noise, and it's funny because I've got a Sputnik dual oscillator, and there's many dual oscillator, and they are all based on the, on Buchla. And it's until I got the 208C that, this dual oscillator started to make sense. It's funny, the interface got me understanding, okay, how do you put this stuff together? I was kind of using the dual oscillator as two oscillator, not really getting them to work together.
Yeah. No, I was lucky. So my friend Mike Thomas also had a full case of Sputnik. He had every module the Sputnik had made. And so that was also really mind opening. I think it was the thing that I love about all of these things we're talking about is the sequencers and them just being totally like not like any sequencer I'd ever seen from any drum machine or, or any other like synth before, having odd numbers. Just a lot of that odd number stuff was really interesting, right? Like all the like
5 stages.
Yeah,
What?
well, I'm saying I think that plays a huge role in the approach you take compositionally too. And I found that getting familiar with that kind of 5-step sequencer has changed my approach when I'm composing melodies on a piano. It's like now I'm more prone to do these kind of like odd metered or odd numbered melodies or chord progressions that before I was hands-on with these like non-traditional, not non-traditional, but like non-8 steps or 16 steps, very squared type sequencers.
Yeah, I think it opens up the whole meter thing,
Yeah.
And I mean, and the first quote, sort of like sequencers and touch plates were 10 for the Buchla design, and but that was because there were 10 tape machines. It wasn't because there were 10 fingers. So I wonder if he just like, the easel is basically a 200 system light. The listener's digest, the user's digest version of a 200 system, because dual oscillator is the same as a 259. And anyway, the other thing is, I remember somebody asked this question recently on YouTube, and I've been trying to figure out why 5, for the easel. But again, it's like 4 factorial is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4, which gives you 24 possibilities. You add that 5th and you get 125 possibilities as far as order of things happening. So it really opens up the possibilities.
Yeah, and I see Kaku Guzman is wondering if there's a technical explanation why Buchla and Serge oscillators are so beefy and organic.
I'm one of those crazy folks that believes that the sound is achievable, pretty much in any of the formats available today. Like, I feel like sound wise, you have every capability in getting the fat, beefy sounds we get from our 208s in Eurorack. I personally feel that is possible.
Yeah. I think it comes down to how hard you have to work for getting a specific sound. Because if you're trying to get, say, like a 208 sound, like you're going to have to work a little bit, but it's achievable in Eurorack or anything. Like you could do it on BCV Rack for that matter.
Totally. So. Actually, that's a good point. Like I'm really digging some of the software solutions. Like I think that Softube Buchla stuff is amazing. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking to get the sound and you're on a budget, absolutely start there. Like that 259 in Softube sounds like the real deal. So, it's definitely the sound of these types of synthesizers are, it's accessible. It's out there. You can find it.
I think you make a good point about working hard for it, because I know just trying to mimic a patch or try to make my own MS-20 in Eurorack format, and just like, I just need I just want that filter sound, so I get 2 filters and try to get close. Of course, like but I like how it's not as immediate as if I just had that module. So I get why you get that feel, like that's why it sounds like that, because you didn't have all the variables that Eurorack will throw in there, or that you might just kind of accidentally nudge and fall out of that perfect mimicry.
But at the end of the day, does it really matter if it sounds identical to an MS-20?
It's better than it doesn't.
It's like
it doesn't.
It's like what did you create with that? Really, is what's most important, it comes down to the music, not so much like I made it sound like this.
I absolutely, I totally agree with you. I think like it just philosophically, I think we all try to we look at music as like an architecture, and we know what a building looks like. We start off with that framework, and synthesizers I think are very similar that way. We say, oh, I kind of want that, like that big beefy sound that I heard in that song, or I know that a certain instrument has, and then you get in there, and if you're open to it, which it sounds like everybody here is, like, you're totally like okay with like being diverged by something else. Wait a minute, that's even more interesting, that's more unique to me. Then you totally forget your blueprint, and now you're kind of rewriting that, what your structure feels like. So but I think you're right, you should definitely be open-minded about it.
My favorite David Tudor quote is he was DIY guy. I mean, he was building his own little modules and getting guitar pedals and creating feedback neural networks. But he said, I try not to find the sound I want out of the module. I don't try to impose what I want. I try to listen to the module and see what it is telling me, what it wants to do.
Embrace what it gives
you. I
you.
think it's, David, it's like you were saying, it's like you get diverted and then you go down that. You're following what the module wants to do rather than telling it what to do.
Yeah.
And that's really the spirit of improvisation too. So those things really go hand in hand and can like inform on each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that was free advice, folks.
Speaking of free, Stevie Fex remind us that today is Bob Moog birthday, and I think you can get all the software version on iPhone and iPad for free today.
Oh, nice.
So if you want to download the Model 15. We spoke about, I don't know, Buchla, Serge, Favio, I think Seat Lombard. Is there any other format? And the Eurorack? We've covered all the formats that exist.
Not all of them, by any means.
No. It's getting hard to like. Eurorack is definitely doing this thing right where it's kind of drifting to some of the stuff that's coming in, even though the plugs and the screws are the same size. It definitely, I feel like is broadening that out for sure. When you're looking at some of the synthesis ideas that are going into those modules, but as far as size and structure, I feel like there are. I mean, there was somebody who just recently made their own modular system. It's kind of an art piece, and it kind of folds out to 3 pieces. And you look at that, and that doesn't fit any of these formats because it's just so unique. And I think that DIY community is coming up with stuff, and the 5U stuff is I don't know. That looks to me to be a new format kind of on its own.
Yeah, I think Look Bum No Computer did his new format, the Cosmo format, which is like it reminds me of 5U, but it's I don't even know. It's weird.
Yeah.
We're reaching the top of the hour, so just reminding the people in the chat, if you've got a question, here is your time. Let's carry on the discussion. So I don't know who. We are about to start to wrap up. So, what's somebody that wants to go into this non-Eurorack format? What's your advice? Why should we do it? What's your advice? How do you start?
I would say it's kind of the same thing I tell anybody who wants to get into any sort of synth stuff. It's find your why. It's not up to me to tell them why they should get into X or Y format. It's like figure out what it is that you're trying to achieve, whether it's music, sound designer, et cetera, and do your research into what tools are best going to get you there. Especially, I also tend to view things differently because for me, it's about, yes, creativity, but also efficiency, I'm often working on a deadline, for the work that I do. So for example, like David was saying, in terms of like, if I need an MS-20 sound, I don't have 2 hours to twiddle around with the Eurorack to get an MS-20 sound. if I can afford it, I'll try to put it into the budget of the project and buy an MS-20 sound so that I could just boom, boom, boom. Okay, 5 minutes, here's the MS-20 sound. Let's move on to the next thing. Obviously, a lot of people take more artistic and non-time constraint approaches and have that flexibility, but I often don't. So for me, the thing is always finding your why for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. I think once you find that why too, it's a lot of people get intimidated by, like, they think anything outside of Eurorack is going to be like way too expensive. And if you really look at the cost of, like, even if you add up all the modules you would want in Eurorack and compare that to something like a Serge system or even like a Buchla 208C, you're getting up there. So it's like synthesizers.com is like a perfect example. Like, those modules are very affordable, all things considered, especially when you compare them to things like Eurorack. Like, they're very similar pricing in a lot of ways. But yeah, you definitely have to figure out what it is that you're trying to achieve and to see if those other formats can provide that for you.
We reached the top of the hour, so we need to wrap up this show. Todd and Galaxy Electric, last word for the end.
Follow the sound.
Everything that Todd said is what I would have said. So, we're just happy to be here. Thank you, everyone.
There's links in descriptions to everybody who's on this panel down. So please, everybody, please show some support. This is time that they volunteered. So I really appreciate everybody, giving us some time and your thoughts and inspiration. So thank you so much.
Thanks for
great to see you all. Thank you all for this.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to Colorado Modular Synth Society for hosting this Synth Summit with Southern California Synth Society. Thank you all. Thanks all for participating.
Thanks,
and
Franck.
don't forget to move to the next YouTube stream. Thanks.
Yes, go to the next show.
Thank you.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.